Hey, welcome to Dan's Model Works and it's new project day. Yay! And wow, do we have a kit for this particular project? Let's first of all address the elephant in the room. This aircraft had an incredibly high accident rate. 25 pilots lost their lives flying this aircraft. A quarter of the airframes built were lost in accidents. Even the manufacturer, Vought, said that upon studying swept-wing aircraft, this had the highest accident rate. Okay, let's get that out there right now, because I know that it doesn't matter what I say about this, there's going to be somebody in the comments who's going to say, do you know what a horrible killer aircraft that was? Yeah, I do. I do. However, when you do enough reading on the Cutlass, for every bad thing that somebody has to say about it, there's reports from pilots saying once you got the thing into the air, it was amazing. Once you got past landing or taking off or things like that, it was fantastic. There were other people that said you could have solved a lot of the faults if the engines had been better, if the landing gear had been better, and things like that. I will not say had it been given a chance. A chance? How many people have to die flying it? You know, there are a lot of aircraft who, if it killed 2 or 3 people, they'd say, nope, not doing this no more. 25 people killed. Now that we've addressed the elephant in the room, it looks like a really cool aircraft. It does. I just finished watching a few minutes ago a video of, it's available on YouTube, and it's basically a whole pile of Cutlass landings. And yeah, obviously it landed a lot of times without, ripping itself apart or exploding or anything like that. And it actually looks pretty cool doing so. I always thought this was kind of a neat looking aircraft. I'm one of these people who likes building aircraft that weren't necessarily winners. One of my favorite models that I've ever built was the Curtiss Helldiver. And that was another aircraft that, really had a horrible accident rate. And only through sheer determination did it succeed in some degree. So, and of course, what this also has going against it is it's a Hobbycraft kit. So there's a good chance it has some fit issues. The detail may not be fantastic. I'm sure somebody's going to tell me that every panel line on this is wrong and that the shape is wrong and everything is wrong. I'm certain of that right now. It doesn't matter. I'm still going to build it. So let's see what we have inside the box. And I have been in this box before, so this isn't exactly the way I got it. I've had this kit for maybe a year or so, and these have come up online reasonably often. I would always say, that's a cool looking aircraft. I know it was a killer, but I'd still like to do it. And finally I pulled the trigger and got it. The decals, these are actually some of the best Hobbycraft decals I've ever seen. There's not a lot on here. You don't have masses of stencils or anything like that on here. But the images themselves are pretty crisp. I know I've had some Hobbycraft kits in the past where everything was just kind of fuzzy and indistinct. This does look pretty good. And the instructions are Hobbycraft's pretty much very long sheet of paper here. Looks like we have 2 paint schemes. This one I think says it's supposed to be natural metal. I would kind of like to do a light gold gray. I don't think I've ever done a US aircraft in the light gold gray yet. So we flip it over. And we're going to start with the cockpit. Then we've got basically the fuselage, the engine section right there. And then the pilot pod goes on next. Then the tails and the landing gear. So, and I think this right here, we have the F7U 3 option. I guess is this part here. Gonna have to do a little more studying. There's the F7U 3M option. Gonna have to see what that's referring to because it looks a little confusing to me. Okay, let's look at the rest of the parts inside here. And already I see a problem. This one of the air inlets, this piece is broken. And you know what? I think I'm going to open up this bag and I'm going to tease that into position right now and glue it together. Here's another look at that broken part. I've already straightened it a little bit. And if you look at the plastic bag right around that, it's really kind of chewed up. So I think as the box was shifting and handled and went from one owner to another owner to another owner, because I don't know how many people owned this before I got it. I think that was a point at which the sprues were rattling together. And you can see that it snagged at some point. So I'm going to try to get that in line, put a little bit of glue on it. Moving on to some of the other sprues, we have what I can only describe as the wing section and the engine pod. Because of course this is where the two engines are residing. There's only just these two parts on the sprue. I'm going to have to be careful separating them. These are some pretty huge molding gates. I won't know till I take them off the sprues, but looks like they're going to fit together okay. There's a lot of plastic here, that's for sure. But the panel lines look pretty good. Like I said, I'm sure somebody in the comments is going to tell me how all these panel lines are wrong. But this part looks okay. Doesn't have any damage on it like that first sprue did. Here is our vertical tail surfaces. There are no horizontal tail surfaces. Once again, we don't know how well they're going to go together yet. But the panel lines look pretty good. This sprue has our missiles on it, and I'm assuming these are fuel tanks. And this looks like one of the alternate parts that we showed us on the instructions. These missiles look like sparrows. Let me look at the instructions again here. Oh, Navy's first missile interceptor carrying Sparrow 1 missiles. And there they are. There's the sparrows. They did not lie. These pylons seem to have a pretty good assortment of detail on them. This is our second last sprue. It has the pilot's pod. The camera's saying, stop moving. And of course, this is the front of the engines. And this is the engine exhaust there. And if you're thinking that, oh my god, almost the whole fuselage is taken up by engine, not really. The engines are only occupying a small portion of the cross section of that rear fuselage. I'm thinking probably this whole area here is all fuel tanks. So, and, whoa, there it is. There's that enormous nose landing gear. Probably, you could argue this is probably one of the biggest Achilles heel of the Cutlass. You could say probably 50% of its problems were underperforming engines, and then this puppy here was the remainder of the problems. A nose gear that long, you're just asking for troubles. So, and I think this retraction strut here is what gave a lot of trouble. So this is probably the thing I'm going to end up breaking once I get this whole thing together. The wheels look pretty good. Oh, that's interesting. They are single piece wheels. You don't have to glue any halves together. That's nice. One more sprue to look at here. I'm going to leave this in the bag temporarily. This is the, obviously the transparency. And there's only two parts in here. We have the windscreen, and then we have the rest of the canopy. And I'm glad that this does not seem to be as tall looking as it appears on the box. Let's take another look at that box art. Yeah, am I the only one who feels that the canopy in the box art looks awfully tall and gawky? Gawky? Is that a word? Anyway, it looks very, very awkward. It's nice to see that the part itself definitely looks a little more sleek. Why is my hand green? Anyone else notice my hand looks green? It's not really green, trust me. It's more of a pale, sickly gray color than green. I think this is an artifact of LED lighting interacting with smartphone cameras. Natasha and I noticed this back in November when we went on a ship watching trip, and I think it was FedNav. All of their floodlights on the cameras looked green, even though when we looked at them, they looked white to us. So, be curious to see if anybody else has noticed weird color things like this. Would you shut up and talk about the model? Oh, okay. Alrighty, it's about 20 minutes later, and you might be wondering why this paintbrush is in here. It was just in there to... I'm going to put my hands behind here again. When this got broken, right where my finger is, that bit of plastic got stretched. So even when I put the two ends together, it still produced a kink in the middle here. So the paintbrush was just basically set in there as something to gently push that broken piece this way to get it to take the same shape as the other part. So I think we were successful in our repairs. We will know when we put the whole thing together. See if we can tempt fate here and get the... Never film next to a furnace. Anyway, here's our instrument panel. That looks pretty good. It's not the most amazing thing I've ever seen, but it does look alright. If we look down the engine exhausts here, we can see there's definitely detail in there. There, the best view we can get with the light going down in there. There's definitely some detail in there. That looks pretty nice. The seat has seat belts already molded in. Not brilliant, but not terrible. I'm going to assume, based on the enormity of this part here, this is for our nose landing gear, or nose gear, because that's a pretty huge part. You can see this is where it's gonna attach. So it's got to be a pretty long part. We'll see when we get to it, I guess. This isn't going to be the worst cockpit I've ever put together in terms of no detail whatsoever. We'll see if we have any room for improving it. But I'm glad that we were able to make that emergency repair to that part. I think I'm going to stick the paintbrush back in there again just to gently shove that over a bit. Well, I'm not starting with the cockpit, even though the instructions say that is where we're going to start. Mostly, I just want to see how this main assembly, the fuselage, is going to go together. Cut it from the sprues. I made sure I used nippers, which are over on the other workbench. I haven't actually trimmed away any of the sprue gates. I just wanted to see how well is it going to go together. And actually, pretty damn good. Looks like everything is going to be, at least on this assembly, let's put it this way, there's no enormous gaps or anything like that. And the engine bulkhead, the front bulkhead here, it fits inside pretty good. And off camera, I was thinking I was going to have to be painting all of this area around the fronts of the engines black. Not going to have to worry about that because Hobbycraft does give us some inlet trunking, which, given the vintage of the kit, is actually pretty good. However, I'm probably not going to glue this in place and then immediately glue those intake trunks in place. I won't do that until I have a good idea of how the front fuselage is going to go in and everything like that. I don't want to plunk these things on and then realize they should be 1 or 2 degrees angled in one direction or the other. But I will pre-paint these silver. I will glue this bulkhead in place, and like I said, the trunking itself, the inlets, I'm going to leave those off. But it is nice to see that this main part of the fuselage is going to go together pretty good. I've got the parts for the left side air intake cut off the sprue, and the ones for the right side I have deliberately left on the sprue because I don't want to get these confused. And you can see I've got LS for left side. And that's just in case I get them mixed up. At least from the outside, they seem to go together pretty good. If we look at the inside of the part, we've got some fairly significant ejector pin marks, especially this one right here. I'm going to do what I can to clean those up now before I glue them together. Here's the right side parts. And as you can see, I've just put a small smear of putty where those ejector pin marks are. Now, I don't know if we're going to see these when it's all put together, but I'd rather invest a little bit of time in filling them and sanding them now rather than get the whole thing together and say, oh, geez, I wish I'd have done something about those. Now, as we look at the inside of the lower wing, you can see that we have some blind holes. We've got a pair there and a pair there. Same thing on the other wing. But curiously, the instructions, they don't tell us we need to drill them out, but they show the drop tank pylon going into a couple of holes, and then they show both of the missile pylons going into, well, they only show one set of holes, they don't show the other set of holes. So, yeah. Well, at the very least, I'm going to drill out all of the blind holes that are currently there so they're ready to go. Alright, I think I have it figured out. There's only supposed to be 2 pylons per ring. You can see that this drop tank, or maybe it's a bomb pylon, not sure which, it occupies the same space as this Sparrow pylon. Then this Sparrow pylon, the lines go underneath the first one to this spot. So there is only supposed to be 2 pylons per wing. So I've opened up all 4 sets of holes, and hopefully that's good. So I may look like I'm jumping ahead, but I'm just trying to anticipate problems. This, of course, is the forward fuselage, the pilot pod, the pointy bit at the front, and the very front seems to come together quite well. But then you look towards the back and we've got some gap we've got to close. It's not requiring a huge amount of force to hold it together, but you know, there are a few alignment issues and such. And you can see we've got a huge gap here because this is where the nose wheel bay goes. So, yeah, we've got some potential problems here, but better to know about them in advance. And we can do a lot of test fitting to solve any problems before, you know, they're unsolvable. Here's the bulkhead for the fronts of the engines. You can see I've given the turbine blades some silver, and the center I just gave them some light gray. This is all the painting we're really going to have to do on this part because the air inlets basically encircle these parts. With the exception of the control stick, here's all the parts they give us for the front office. Possibly with the exception of the combing over the instrument panel. Anyway, they're not the most amazing parts that have ever been cast for a model, but they aren't bad. I'm just going to be studying some pictures to see if there's anything that I can add. Now, this part right here, it does have a nasty sinkhole, which I'm going to take care of right now. But yeah, so far this isn't looking horrible. It's not like a lot of the interiors where basically there's a shelf for some dude to sit on, and I've had to scratch build everything. This isn't too bad. I've got the air inlets just basically mocked up on the engine bulkhead here, and you can see that there's our engine faces hidden down there, which is nice. I'm going to try not to glue these air inlets in place until I'm very close to putting the front section of the fuselage on, the pilot pod. And the reason is, and I'm going to try to hold the camera steady here, I think if these things are at the slightly wrong angle, you're probably going to have lots of fit issues. So what I'd like to do is basically not glue these parts on till just when I'm just mocking up the front fuselage's fit, that I'm very close to gluing it in place. And the camera's jumping because it's the auto stabilization. In my non-steady hands, it tries to keep everything steady, and then it says, oh, I give up for a second, and the picture snaps. But anyway, I will be gluing this bulkhead in before I glue these on. But I don't think that's going to be a problem. It's not like it's a difficult fitment. It's just basically put some glue on the base of them, smush them in place, and then if you use a slow drying glue, you should be able to adjust your angles as you mock up the fit of the front fuselage. I've got that bulkhead glued in place. The top and bottom of the rear fuselage is not glued together. I've basically got it set up like this so that I can make sure that it sits in there properly. If we flip it around, I don't know if you can see it. You can't see it. Anyway, there is a heavy lug molded to the top side of the fuselage. And that seems to be there to make sure that this goes in and stays vertical. Now, I'm not ready to glue the top and bottom together, but if I hold this together while this sets up, it should end up being nice and vertical like it should be. As you can tell, I've been doing some major gluing. I've got the wings and the rear fuselage together. Get the Cutlass pins off. The fit of, well, I'm tempted to call it a tail cone, but the engine exhausts fit into this. Doesn't seem to be too brilliant here. There seems to be a little bit of warpage with this part here, so I'm going to use a sanding block to try to true that up a bit. There, you can see that tightened it up pretty well. There's only one area that I think is going to require a little bit of sanding, and that is right around here. There's a little bit of proudness of the part on the back end there. Gonna have to sand that down. But otherwise, it did tighten up pretty good. With the exception of the control stick, I've got the main parts here for the cockpit all painted up. I'm still going to be giving them a bit of a wash here to bring out some more of the detail. I was thinking of scratch building a lot more detail for the cockpit, but I don't think the opening is that large, and honestly I'd just be guessing at whatever I was adding to it, so I figured I was just going to leave well enough alone. It isn't the worst cockpit I've ever seen, and here it is all put together, like I said, with the exception of the control stick. I gave it a light wash. I'm just waiting for the seat to dry before I start fiddling with it to check to see how good or how poor. I'm thinking poor the fit is going to be going into that nose section. Okay, we have the cockpit glued into one side, and we have that giant nose gear bay glued in as well. I've done a little bit of tidying up of this peg back here, and the fit of that has improved considerably. So I am allowing all of this to dry, and then I'm going to bring these bits together, and hopefully I get a decent fit. And I'm planning on just blopping that control column in at a later date. Now, one note here, this part right here looks like it's supposed to slide in a slot that's formed between the fuselage halves on the real plane, and the instructions don't really say where it needs to be put. I'm suspecting that possibly the glazing is supposed to glue onto this and it's supposed to slide back and forth. You know what? I think I'm going to take the lower part of the T off, and then I'm going to glue this in later. We will just go from there, because I'm not planning on having a functioning sliding cockpit canopy. Yes, judging from the instructions, you can see how that T fits here, and the fact that they're asking to put the canopy on at this early stage, that seems to be what they want you to do. That movable bulkhead does fit kind of sort of in here, but if we look here, you can see the front edge of the rear part of the canopy is pretty darn thick. I have ways of thinning that down, but I'm not getting into it today. So I am going to leave this part off, take the bottom of the T off it, and when I do install this on the model, it's going to be permanent. It's not going to be something I can slide back and forth. I'm just doing a test fit here, and actually everything is coming together pretty darn good. What helps is we can actually gain access through the back here. So I think I'm going to bite the bullet and glue this together. I'm sure that'll be a huge mistake, but oh well. It's just a model. Anyone who's built aircraft models will understand. So I had to have these clothespins on. Plus, I had to use my hands as human clamps. But this did go together reasonably well. You can see I'm going to have to do some sanding and filing here. But shoot, that is nothing. The top of the nose is pretty good. So is the underside. The nose gear bay from HE double hockey stick. Yeah, that fit pretty good. A little bit we've got to clean up there, but hey, that looks pretty good. You know you want me to put this together. So, there we go. Looking like something out of the Thunderbirds. Other than the vertical tails, this is all there is to it. It doesn't get any bigger than this. Now, of course, we do still have the air inlets have to go in, and I'm hoping that will tidy this whole area up. But I think this is a good place to leave off for this episode. And hope everyone is enjoying this build. Till next time, just keep on modeling.
Sit, Indy, sit. Good dog.